Buenas, buenas, buenas. I'm Vanessa, the host of Chicklet, a podcast to empower women. Each episode, I'll unlock the power of stories by exploring popular chicklet themes and use them as a starting point for insightful conversations. Today's episode is on the book The Body Keeps the Score by Bessel van Kolk. Bessel founded a trauma center and treated thousands of traumatized people alongside his colleagues. The principal mission of the center was to take care of the children and adults and also conduct research to explore the effects of traumatic stress on different populations and to determine what treatments work for whom. He wrote today's book to serve as both a guide and an invitation to dedicate ourselves to facing the reality of trauma, to explore how best to treat it, and to commit ourselves as a society to using every means we have to prevent it. I feel like that's the whole point of my podcast and ultimately why I decided to do a podcast episode on this book, despite some of the controversy behind the author, Bessel. There were some accusations that he was bullying people at work, and if you kind of look into it, there seems to be like money involved. And so I'm not saying that he's innocent. I'm just saying that I don't know. And when money is involved, people do crazy stuff. So I'm just, for the sake of this podcast, I'm just gonna move on with the work that he contributed to psychology and focus on that. Obviously, I don't condone bullying people at work, but it doesn't seem to have been resolved. So we're just gonna focus on his work and keep it moving. Bessel is also the child of a Holocaust survivor, and he speaks out against the atrocities occurring against the Palestinian people. Not to mention, on the first page of the book, Bessel says, we don't need to go to Africa to see pain. We have it right here in the US. And those things are very important to me, right? Like, I know that it's very hard for a lot of people right now to stand with the Palestinian people. So I appreciate that he is speaking out about the Palestinian people. And also the fact that he mentioned on the first page, he's coming in strong, coming in hot with saying that we don't need to go to Africa to see pain. Like, I think that in the US, it's very common for people to be like, make sure you finish your food. There are kids in Africa who don't have food. And it's like, so what are you doing to alleviate that then? And like, again, like he said on the first page, we don't need to go to Africa. There are children starving in our country right here. So why are you bringing up Africa? And it's just like a very common thing that we do here in the United States, where it's like we kind of make it seem like pain and trauma and injustices are elsewhere. And it's very much here, and we're very much have a role in it. And it's right here in front of our faces, and we need to pay attention to it. So I appreciate that all of his stances so far. And like, I finished the book. I didn't read it 100% completely because the book itself is very dense. It's very heavy. It's very jargony. It's like a textbook. He's obviously sharing his own experience. He's sharing his experience as a clinician, his experience with his patients, and sharing those like personal anecdotes, which are amazing, but it's still very dense. And so, you know, I don't know if you can notice, but I'm a little sick. I was at the convention last week, and I like to record and get things ahead of themselves so that I'm not like recording, editing, posting, like reading, recording, editing, posting. Like, I like to get ahead of myself a little bit. So I decided to just read most of the book. I did read most of it, but just to save some brain space, I wasn't able to read the book in its entirety because of the density of it. If you want to read the book, you should. If you're ever going to listen to my book review podcast to avoid reading a textbook like self-help book, it would be listening to this episode for the book The Body Keeps the Score, because like I said, super dense. And if you're ever gonna like cliff note it and do like the easy way out, just listen to my podcast episode, because I'm just gonna talk to you about all the new stuff, and you don't have to like flip through 600 pages of dense, jargony information. The entire theme throughout the book is how humans are very resilient. So throughout, you feel very empowered and curious about the research and the stories he shares and like how it affects you. Like, how does that play in your life? He also shares 3 fairly new branches of science that have led to an explosion of knowledge about the effects of psychological trauma, abuse, and neglect. Those 3 branches are neuroscience, the study of how the brain supports mental processes; developmental psychopathology, the study of the impact of adverse experiences on the development of mind and brain; and interpersonal neurobiology. That's the study of how our brain influences the emotions, biology, and mindsets of those around us. So it's still like a work in progress. I think a lot of times we think that we're so advanced and we have everything figured out. And like, I often think, when I'm 80, 90 years old and I'm talking to my like grandkids or my nieces' kids, my grand nieces and nephews. Is that how you say it? I don't know. But I always I'm so excited to hear what's new and what science has come up with, because it's only going to continue to advance, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to laughing at literally this episode and being like, can you believe who did she think she was, thinking that she knew all this cool stuff? And it's like, there's going to be even more in the coming years. So I'm looking forward to that. I'm looking forward to continue learning. So let's get started with the chisme. We'll start with the science behind the trauma and some facts around that. So in the 1960s, researchers found that the levels of neurotransmitters, which are, chemical messengers that carry information from one neuron to the next, they were abnormally low in people with depression and schizophrenia, and there was hope that we could develop drugs that could target brain abnormalities. They also shared that traumatized people keep secreting large amounts of stress hormones long after the actual danger has passed. Being able to move and do something to protect oneself is a critical factor in determining whether or not a horrible experience will leave long-lasting scars. Also, whether or not you have a secure base to help you process the trauma right after it happens determines if it'll leave long-lasting scars as well. And this was shown when if you were in a car accident and you were stuck in the car, not only is the accident going to cause trauma, but if you are stuck in the car and unable to move, that is what's going to add that extra layer of trauma. Or for example, another one was the kids in the Holocaust. Not only was the Holocaust, if they were sent away from their parents and they were sent to a safe place, right? Like they're not being bombed, they're not near Nazis. If they were sent away, but they didn't have their secure base, a parent there to process their feelings, they oftentimes had more trauma than the kids who stayed home and heard the bombing every single day at home with their parents. So it's that having that safe space and being able to get out of a situation, it really, there's so many factors of your physical body and where your body is and who's helping you process your emotions. All of those things play a role, not just the event that occurred. So it's very complex. We also have our survival system. It's the automatic nervous system, and that is made up of several different factors, several different systems. First, we have the sympathetic nervous system, and those are chemicals that fuel the body and brain to take action. So when you inhale, you're increasing your heart rate. And then you have your parasympathetic nervous system, which is a chemical that I can't really say. I'm going to try to say it. Acetylcholine, and that helps regulate the bodily functions like digestion, wound healing, sleeps, dreams. And when you exhale, that's your parasympathetic nervous system, and that's decreasing your heart rate. So we have the heart rate measures, and that helps us see how well those two systems are working together. Having that balance between the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system gives us control over our responses to minor frustrations and disappointments, so that we can calmly assess the situation and react in the way that we want to react. Lack of coherence between the breathing and the heart make people vulnerable to lots of different physical illnesses, heart disease, cancer, and mental health problems like depression and PTSD. One of the first times that I really was made aware of this was with my pelvic floor pain. One of the first things that I did was, I obviously went to the gyno, and my gyno told me that I just needed to have a glass of wine and some Advil and I'd be fine. And I was like, okay, dude, never coming to you again, because that's a terrible advice, advising people to drink alcohol to numb pain from a doctor. Crazy as fuck. So I went to a different gynecologist, and she was a Black woman, and she suggested that I go to like a support group for people with chronic physical pain, because in that support group, she really educated us on how our brain influences our physical pain as well. One of the things that she did was she had us become really aware of our muscles and our body. So what we would do is we would do a body scan. And so that's when you start at the tip of your toes and you squeeze your toes, you squeeze them, you squeeze them, you squeeze them, and then you let them go. And you just really become aware of the sensation. What does this feel like when you're tensing? And what does this feel like when you're super relaxed? So you just become aware of those feelings, and then you move on to like your ankle, or like the heel of your toe, your ankle, your shin, your calf, your knee, your thighs, your butt, your tummy, your chest, your shoulders, your biceps, your wrists, your face, your skull. Like you do an entire body scan, and it's just you becoming aware of that breathing and your muscle body tension. Because if you're able to do that, if you're really able to pay attention to your body, then when you are, let's say, around someone and you notice, hey, my toes are really scrunched up, or hey, like my butt is really scrunched up, or my shoulders are really tense right now, like you start to really notice, your body starts to tell you like, hey, I don't like this person, or hey, this person is not safe to me. I don't know what it is about this person, but you don't like them, you don't feel safe with them, so just become aware of that. So it's really becoming in tune of your breathing and your muscle movements so that you can be more in tune with your body, because this entire book is just about how in order for you to be a healthy, like well-rounded person, you have to be aware of what your body is doing, and that'll make you more confident and more solid if you are able to acknowledge the feelings that you're having and address them. And it'll just make you safer in all situations, whether it's taking a little break or taking a deep breath, just making you, literally, it just makes you feel more confident if you're more aware of the sensations that your body is going through. One of the other things that they talk about is the ACE test. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it, but it's the Adverse Childhood Experiences test. And I think that we would be kind of surprised to see what it makes it on this test. I think because your experience becomes so normal to you that you think that it's not trauma or it's not an adverse childhood experience. For example, I literally was just talking to my cousin about this the other day. Like being in a single mom home, like that is an adverse like childhood experience. Like, do we look at it as a positive, powerful thing that our moms were able to work together and be the parents that raised us? Like, yeah, we look at it as a positive thing, but having one person be in charge of everything for all these culicados, like that is not a normal thing. But because it's so normal to us, like a lot of us have experienced like our home was single moms, that we think it's so normal, but like it's really not. And then also another thing is we normalize the things that we have experienced, and then we self-diagnose ourselves with things that we really don't even have. Like, for example, a lot of us say that we have ADHD. Like, I'm so sorry, as a teacher of special education, as an ex-teacher of special education, like, if you have ADHD, it makes it extremely difficult to like do any tasks at all. Like, we love to claim that we have OCD. It's like, no, like OCD like is debilitating. Like, you are not able to function with these types of diagnosis. And like, sure, there are spectrums, sure, there are people that have it very severely, and like maybe you have a lower on the spectrum of it, like maybe you're a little lower on the spectrum, fine, sure, I'll give you that. But there's so many of us that are just like, oh yeah, like I just had a panic attack. Like, no girl, you were just anxious. Like, you were just nervous. Like, I think a panic attack is like literally like you're having a heart attack and you think you're gonna die. And it's like, I'm not saying hyperbolically, like literally that you literally think that you're gonna die. Like, did you really experience that? Like, probably not. Like, so it's so funny that our generation loves to say like, oh, like this is no big deal. It's normal to have a single mom, but also I have OCD. It's like, girl, Like, we got to be real careful about the language that we're using when describing mental health things, because there are people who have experienced severe trauma or have these mental health disorders, and we are, by us falsely labeling them, we're giving them a false image of what it looks like, and like lying to people. Like, we're keeping up this false image of it, and it's like very dangerous. So I think that we need to be more careful of like the way we're out here labeling stuff. With that being said, I do want to call and like bring your attention to the ACE test. This is a test that researchers determined that 10 specific traumatic childhood experiences, ACEs, that could be linked to higher likelihood of health challenges later in life, and that the likelihood of these negative effects increased with the number of ACEs a child experienced. So if you experienced one, your likelihood is like slim, right? But if you experienced like 9 or 10 of them, like your chances of those things negatively affecting your health increases significantly. So the more you have, the more it negatively affects you, obviously. So if you're driving, don't do this. I don't like when y'all drive and like are active. So just listen. I'll ask the 10 questions, and this is all before your 18th birthday, okay? So did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often swear at you, insult you, put you down, or humiliate you, or act in a way that made you afraid that you might be physically hurt? So if you answered yes, then you have 1 point right now. Did a parent or other adult in the household often or very often push, grab, slap, or throw something at you, or ever hit you so hard that you had marks or were injured? So if you said yes, you have a point. Did an adult or person at least 5 years or older than you ever touch or fondle you, or have you touch their body in a sexual way, or attempt to actually have oral, anal, or vaginal intercourse with you? Did you often or very often feel that no one in your family loved you or thought you were important or special, or your family didn't look out for each other, feel close to each other, or support each other? Did you often or very often feel that you didn't have enough to eat, had to wear dirty clothes, and had no one to protect you, or your parents were too drunk or high to take care of you or take you to the doctor if you needed? Were your parents ever separated or divorced? That's one of them. So it's like, if your parents were ever separated or divorced, you have an adverse childhood experience. Was your parent or caregiver often or very often pushed, grabbed, slapped, or had something thrown at him or her? Sometimes, often, or very often kicked, bitten, hit with a fist, or hit with something hard, or ever repeatedly hit over at least a few times, or threatened with a gun or knife? Did you live with anyone who was a problem drinker or alcoholic, who used street drugs? Was a household member depressed or mentally ill, or did a household member attempt suicide? And the last question is, did a household member go to prison? So those acts of violence that we often think like it's just like our parents fighting, or my dad was like cheating, or it's just like coke, like I don't know, like we normalize the fucked up things. And yeah, so I just want to really highlight that like you might be a little bit more fucked up than you think you are. So look into it. Look into therapy. One fun fact that I thought was very interesting is that antipsychotic drugs were a major factor in reducing the number of people living in mental health hospitals in the United States from over 500,000 in 1955 to fewer than 100,000 in 1996. We also had to close a lot of those down because of the mistreatment that the people were experiencing. But I think that there's a lot happened in those 50 years or 40 years between 1955 and 1996 to go from 500,000 people living in mental hospitals in the US to 100,000 people living in mental hospitals in the US. The mental hospitals used to only focus on the symptoms of trauma, not the history that caused the symptoms. Bessel said he was often surprised by the dispassionate way patients' symptoms were discussed and by how much time was spent on trying to manage their suicidal thoughts and self-destructive behaviors rather than on understanding the possible causes of the despair and helplessness. And that's new. You know what I'm saying? Like that is a new concept. Like I know that we all like feel old, like we're 30, 40, maybe 50 years old, but in like the 50s and 60s, like it was very common to just like think that you were crazy. And it's like now we know, like, oh, if you act this way, it's because of something that happened to you and you haven't healed from it and you need to go process that. Like we know these things now, but that was not always the case. And it just really like when he's talking the whole time while he's talking about his patients and like how other people viewed them and how other doctors viewed them and interacted with them, it really just reminded me a lot of teaching, you know? I know you guys will want to hear about my experience teaching. You're just dying to hear it. But it's really hard for me to like express like what happened, you know? Like there were all of us were severely underpaid. And so when you're so underpaid, my mom hates when I talk about poor people and I make it seem like they're bad people, and that it's not the case at all. I'm just saying like living in poverty really negatively affects you. Like if you are not able to like buy food or pay for rent or put gas in your car to get to work or even have a car, like there's so many things that negatively affect you when you don't have money for it. And so like that's what teaching was. Like none of us had money, and so there were people who were in charge of getting the students into the school or managing them during lunchtime or being substitute teachers, and they were making like less than 40K a year. Like that's not a lot of money after taxes. How much are you making? Like after taxes, what, 25K a year? So it's like $1,000, no, like $2,000 a month. Like rent in Jersey alone is a lot more than that. So it's like we like a lot of it's like, and then the kids are with them, with those people who should deserve more money. Like I want to make that clear. I'm not talking shit about them. They deserve more money, but they're not receiving the money, so they don't want to be there. They're pissed that they have to be there, or maybe they're tired from having all the jobs that they have to have in order to supplement their income, to have a livable wage and be able to like live. So like they're tired, they don't want to be there. The kids are bad as fuck. So then what do? They're like frustrated at the kids. They take it out on the kids. They yell at them. They talk shit to them. When they leave the room, they're just like, oh, I can't stand that kid. So it's like when there are a few of us who actually see these kids for human beings that have feelings and that are gonna grow to be part of society, like there were really only a few of us who really respected them as humans, which sounds fucked up, I know, but it's very true. Like there was people who would like kick kids that were 10 years old. They would kick them out for not having pencils. Like, so girl, you never forgot anything. You never forgot your wallet at home. You never forgot your license. You never went to the airport and forgot the ticket at home. You know what I'm saying? Like, we all forget things, but it's like they don't view them as humans who are capable of making mistakes or growing or feeling. Like, so it's like you interact with these people and you do what you can in your classroom, but at the end of the day, those kids were just with the people that hate them. So then they come into your classroom and you have to combat that. You have to combat the kids and their experience with other white women, because that's what teaching is, right? Like statistically, it's like 80% white women. So it's like statistically, they were with a white woman who hated them. And then now they're in my classroom, a white woman, and I didn't hate them, but they were carrying that trauma with them. So I'm like trying to tell them, like, I'm not fighting with you. Like, I'll call your mom right now. I'm telling her to take away your video game. I'm telling your grandma to stop taking you to get your nails done, which is what I did. Like, I would have systems with parents and be like, I'm gonna call you on Friday and let you know if you can go take her to get her nails done. And like, my students will be pissed, but girl, you gotta do your work and then you can get your nails done. Like, you can't just be looking cute, dumb as hell. Like, that's not how it works. So I would do those things with the kids, and they respected that. You know, I want you to do well, and you were going to do well in my class, and I care about you and respect you, and I'm sorry that that teacher's a piece of shit. I can't do anything about it, and I'm going to try my best. But it's like, it's so exhausting to do that year after year after year, having all these people be overworked, underpaid, negative interactions with the students, and then they come into your classroom. You try your best, and then where are they going after your classroom? To some other bitch that hates them. And so it's funny because Bessel literally described that in the book. Like, he's like, he literally talked about how he was at this one psychiatric place, and he's like, I couldn't stay there because everyone hated the patients and treated them poorly. And he's like, there was nothing I could contribute there. Like, the system and the culture of the teacher world is what it is, and me being one person, I wasn't able to impact it. Now, with this podcast, I think I'm able to impact all of you and share these stories with you, and I'm able to be a happy, healthier person to be able to make an impact in another way. I wish that I had the capacity to stay and be that one teacher that would, like, you know, be there for the kids and believe in them and connect with them and give them that positive experience. That's just, like, way too much to put on one person. I'm sorry that I can't do that. Like, if you judge me for that and you hate me for that, like, peace, girl. I don't know what to tell you. Like, I'm also a human with feelings, and I need a life to live. Like, I'm not trying to kill myself, like, literally. So just whatever you take, do what you want with that information. But a turning point in psychology arrived in 1980 when a group of Vietnam veterans, aided by the New York psychoanalyst Cham Shatan and Robert J. Lifton, successfully lobbied the American Psychiatric Association to create a new diagnosis: post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, systematically identifying the symptoms and grouping them together into a disorder finally gave a name to the suffering of people who were overwhelmed by horror and helplessness. With a conceptual framework of PTSD in place, the stage was set for a radical change in our understanding of our patients. This eventually led to an explosion of research and attempts at finding effective treatments. And again, so many people think like, oh, I have PTSD from like whatever, I have PTSD from this relationship. Like, I don't know that you do. Like, PTSD is extremely severe and gives you this sense of horror and helplessness. Like, if you are claiming that you have PTSD, I'll just run with that example of a relationship. Like, are you still dating? Are you still talking to men? Because if you are still dating and you are still talking to men, you don't have PTSD. Like, that is not what horror and helplessness is. I have PTSD from teaching because I had horror and helplessness and I was unable to continue on with life. Like, I don't think that people really understand, and this is why I don't talk about it, because I just end up crying, and I don't want to cry and I don't want to feel that way, and you guys want to hear it, and like I would love to tell you, but it's like extremely painful. Like there is a sense of like doom and like inescapable, like you cannot escape the feeling, and it's like it was extremely difficult to get out of that. But I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. It's like how you get out of it, like how you move on from the horror and helplessness and pain, and how you process it, acknowledge it, honor it, accept it, and leave it behind and move on with your life in a more positive, fulfilling way, which I'll get to. I do want to speak more a little bit on like the PTSD experience, and that's when people are compulsively and constantly pulled back into the past. So the last time they felt intense involvement and deep emotions, they suffer from a failure of imagination, a loss of mental flexibility. Without imagination, there is no hope, no chance to envision a better future, no place to go, no goal to reach. The rational, logical side of your brain turns off, and your intuitive, artistic side turns off. You lose your sense of self, if you even had one to begin with. So again, if you think you have PTSD, did that just describe what you're experiencing? Because if it is, okay, cool, you have PTSD. Well, also, I'm not a doctor, so I don't really, don't do that. But I just, to the point that we are over diagnosing ourselves with like, I have PTSD, like, girl, no you don't, 9 times out of 10, no we don't. Because trauma produces actual physiological changes, including a recalibration of the brain's alarm system, an increase in stress stress hormone activity and alterations in the system that filters relevant information from irrelevant information. So you're not able to make that distinction. So if you ever notice like people who are always constantly irritable, always angry, always ready to fight, it's because their filter through trauma, because they have PTSD, they have lost that alarm system and everything is dangerous. Everything. Someone smiling at them, someone asking them if they need anything, someone saying excuse me, like all of those things, it's like someone's trying to hurt me. So it's just like being traumatized means continuing to organize your life as if the trauma were still going on right now, as every new encounter or event is contaminated by the past. Trauma robs you of being in charge of yourself. You have to find a way to be calm, learn to maintain that calmness, and find a way to be present and be honest with yourself. As long as people are hyper aroused or shut down, they can't learn from experience. So recovery from trauma involves the restoration of executive functioning and with it self-confidence and the capacity for playfulness and creativity. Neuroscience research shows that the only way we can change the way we feel is by becoming aware of our inner experience. It's been proven that 10 weeks of yoga practice reduces the PTSD symptoms. You have to notice, name it to claim it, breathe to regulate, and notice the difference between the before and the after. That's why before I was mentioning the body scans, because you have to be able to notice like, oh, I'm stressed out. You have to like physically feel that you're stressed out, notice it, acknowledge it, and then feel calmer and be like, oh, okay, acknowledge that calmness to make it more normalized. You have to normalize the calmness. There's also this therapy called CBT, and reading this book, they shared that CBT actually doesn't work for traumatized people. I didn't realize that. A CBT, I think, is just for people who are trying to process things in general, but when you're talking about severe trauma, CBT is not helpful. What is helpful is EMDR. I've never done it and I want to do it, which is eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. I don't know if I said that word right, but that was founded by Francine Shapiro in 1987 when she noticed rapid eye movements produced a dramatic relief from her distress while walking in a park while preoccupied with painful memories. So in the book, Bessel really describes it really well, that like you basically are explaining to the mind while moving your finger and thinking about or speaking about a traumatic event and or finger or a light of some sort. It's like by doing this, it really roots your brain in the present right now, because when you think of trauma or you experience trauma, you are back in time. It's literally like time travel. Your brain literally thinks that you're in a different time period. And so it's like by moving your finger or doing the light or whatever EMDR does, it brings you back to the fact that you are in a safe place. You are not experiencing that extreme trauma. Again, not talking about a breakup, like normal life changes. I'm talking about like extreme trauma. That's what I'm talking about. So it takes you out of that experience and brings you back to reality, which is your present day. And so the way that you heal it is you have to learn to inhabit your body. Trauma won't heal until you're safe enough in your body to acknowledge what's going on. So that's why I work out. Like when I work out, it sounds so stupid. I know I sound like such an idiot, but it's like when you're working out, I'm literally focusing on my body. Like if I'm doing my arms, I'm focusing on my core, I'm focusing on my breathing, I'm focusing on my thoughts, I'm focusing on my legs. I'm literally focusing on being in my body so that I can be super present and honor it, and I'm not ignoring it, and I'm not just pushing through. I can really see how my body is feeling so that when I'm in a public setting or in a work setting or doing this podcast, I can acknowledge my feelings and acknowledge my experience so that I can make it a positive one. If I'm feeling negative in any way, I'm able to take control of it and change it and make it what I want it to be. Victims of abuse often feel tension in their head, their back, their limbs, like wherever the trauma occurred. If you're a victim of sexual assault, you feel tension in your vulva or your rectum, and all of that is from self-numbing and bracing for the trauma. Again, when you go through trauma, you live in it, so you're constantly tensing up, expecting the trauma to happen because you haven't healed from it. Once you're able to be in your body, you're able to acknowledge that is in the past and you are not safe anymore, and you no longer need to tense and brace for it. You can relax and be more present and be healed from the trauma. And that pain, if you are a victim of traumas, that pain will define their reality without ever being identified as a symptom of their attempt to cope with the trauma. And that the only reason why I was able to do that was because I went to a Black female doctor, and she was able to ask me, like, have you ever, been raped? And it's like, yes. And like, it's been hard for me to get to that point to say yes, because I've shared in past episodes, it's not the stereotypical, like, what you see in the movies where you're walking down the street and like a stranger pulls you. Like, no, it's always been guys that I liked. It's always been guys that I liked and wanted to be with, and I didn't want to disappoint them, and they force yourselves on you, and you don't want to say no because I was a child, I was like in my early 20s, and it's like, well, started, I guess, when I was like 9, but then it continues on until, my boyfriend's really one of the only guys that I've been comfortable enough to feel safe with. And so it's, I don't want to share too much of our experience just to protect his privacy, but it's like he does such a great job of working with me through that to make sure that I'm replacing negative experiences when it comes to intimacy with positive ones, and like reminding myself that I'm safe. And he's really great at helping me through that in his own way as well. Again, I don't want to like sit here and tell you what we do in the bedroom, but it's like, it's been through my interactions with him in intimacy and being safe, and those conversations that we have, before intimacy and after intimacy, those things are the things that have helped me tremendously heal and be more present in my body and feel safer. In my next episode, I'm gonna have Juliana Londoño. She's a Latina therapist. She's gonna be on, and I'm sure we'll talk more about this. I don't want to sit here and tell you like a list, like do 1, 2, 3, 4, you're gonna be healed. Like, I think everyone's trauma deserves its own remedy and its own way to heal, and I've only gone through a certain set of traumas. I'm sure people listening have experienced other things, so you have to find your own way that works, which, sorry, I know that sucks. Like, I know you want me to tell you what to do and like, oh, do now we're healed. Like, I wish I could do that. It's not real. Like, that's not real life. You have to do what works for you. You have to constantly be, going to the therapist, trying the medication, trying the hippie things, trying the Western things, you have to try all the things and see what works for you. And like, when you do that lesson flows into all areas of life. Like, you should be doing that with people too. Talk to everybody, see what type of person you like, see what type of interactions you like, go for walks, go for hikes, read books, take naps, be a morning person, be a night person. You have to really see what you prefer and see what works for you, and you have to make it happen. Which is a lot. It takes time. Like, I've been doing this literally since I was like 22. I'm 32 right now. So it takes a long time, but I've dedicated my life to being happier and healthier. And, fucking everyone is obsessed with that. Everyone I know is like, oh my God, I love that you're doing your podcast. That's so cool. It's like, yeah, girl, it's taken me a long time. It's taken me a long time to be okay with all of my life circumstances, and like, doing this podcast, I talk about it every time. It's like, I'm doing the podcast and I'm also poor as hell. Like, you have to be okay with certain circumstances, and you have to, like, you determine what you're okay with. You know what I'm saying? Like, there are people who are not okay with that, or they're not able to, and they have to have that job that ain't shit to get their pay and be able to, like, everyone needs to do what they gotta do. Like, so people love to like compliment me. It's like, no, girl, I'm proud of you for doing what you're doing. Like, don't be proud of me. Well, yes, be proud of me, but also I'm proud of you. Like, don't don't like sensationalize and make it seem like I'm some hero and some special person. Like, I'm really not. I'm just a girl that's trying to like do what makes me happy. Like, I don't know. Like, I think we should all be doing that. And obviously this is all connected, because once you're able to inhabit your body, that's when you're able to go into self-leadership. You're able to determine, you're trying all these things, and it's like, I don't know what I like. I don't know what type of person I like. I don't know what type of food I like. I don't know what type of exercise I like. It's like that self-leadership and like you owning yourself and being very empowered. You're able to determine, and you're able to make a claim and be like, I don't like this. I don't like this type of person. I don't like this type of food. I don't like this type of workout. I don't like this type of podcast. You're able to make the claims after. It's a process. You have to like hit certain blocks in order to do that. Let's get into lo malo. I feel like before it was just el chisme and lo bueno, like it was just everything all together. I kind of want to get into lo malo. I'm just going to talk about some things that may be sad, or I don't agree with, or just bad stuff, I guess. One of the things that I found was really sad and depressing. Prescribing drugs gave doctors a greater sense of efficacy and provided a tool beyond talk therapy. I have used a mood stabilizer and an anxiety medication in the past, and I advocate for it because my goal was not to be on it forever. And if you need to be on it forever, do that. Like, if you need that in order to survive and get through the day, obviously do that. But I was using it as a tool to bring my senses down and be able to be open to positivity and calmness, and learn how to live in that state of calmness and not be scared by it. And after I got used to it, it was about 1.5 years, that's when I got off the medication. And so those drugs are really good, right? But the reason why it's in lo malo is because drugs also produced income and profits. And so again, do you see why we love this book? Because he's a doctor, and he is talking about how these doctors are incentivized to prescribe these medications. Like, these drug companies that are selling these drugs, they tell the doctors, you'll get a bonus if you prescribe 50 people this drug. And so they prescribe it, they overprescribe it, they give it to everyone, they line their pockets, people are over drugged, and they're not processing their feelings, they're not being fulfilled, and they're miserable at work. They're miserable at home. So it's like this terrible cycle, and Bessel talks about it. He talks about how we're just like blindly, putting band-aids over issues rather than really healing from them. And it's a big problem, obviously. In many places, drugs have displaced therapy and enabled patients to suppress their problems without addressing the underlying issues. The brain disease model takes control over people's fate out of their own hands and puts doctors and insurance companies in charge of fixing their problems. Medicaid, the government health program of the poor, spends more on antipsychotics than any other class of drugs. On November 4, 2013, Johnson & Johnson agreed to pay more than $2.2 billion in criminal and civil fines to settle accusations that it had improperly promoted the antipsychotic drug Risperdal to adults, children, and people with developmental disabilities. But nobody is holding the doctors who prescribed them accountable. Obviously, I'm a proponent for drugs as a tool. If you need it for long term, obviously, like I said, do that. But I thought that was really important. And I guess another part of lo malo is like how heavy and jargony the book is. If you want something that's lighter and cuter, I would suggest Kristen Neff's Self-Compassion. You do talk a little bit about, the science, the neurons and stuff like that, but she's a woman, she's a lot softer about it, and it's a lot calmer. I read it a long time ago. My friend told me that she did not like it because she said something about like how the Pledge of Allegiance empowered her or something like in the book, and so I get how corny and weird that sounds, but I thought it was a lot softer of a book than what this book is talking about. So if you like this episode, be sure to subscribe on YouTube or Spotify, like, comment, and leave a review. New episodes are uploaded on Mondays. You can also follow me on social media at Chicklit Podcast. And remember, if you have any book recommendations or want to be on the podcast, let me know. Thanks for listening. Bye.